Welcome to today's session. It is called Before You Put Pen to Paper, 5 Steps to Prepare for Your First or Next Grant. We are hanging out today with Lesa-Kaye, who has so much awesome insight to share. When we did our little call before this, I know I learned a ton about grant writing, and we weren't even trying to cover that topic at the time. So welcome. Just before we get started, a couple little housekeeping items. If you are a QGIF client, I do see some familiar names popping up in the chat. I am thrilled to see you. If you have any questions about your account or how to do anything with QGIF, do let me know. If I can't get you the right answer, I can at least get you to someone who can. And then I wanted to let you know that we are recording this webinar. You will get a recording of the webinar. You'll get it tomorrow morning, unless something unprecedented happens. And with that recording, you'll also get a copy of Lesa-Kaye's slides and some other cool resources that you can use as you're working through your grants. Now, a quick note. So there's a chat box, which I see a lot of you are using, which makes me really happy. That you have two options with your chat box. You can either chat directly to me and Lesa-Kaye, in which case only me and Lesa-Kaye will see it, or you can change your preference to chat to everyone. So if you would like others to see your answer, try that. If you are going to ask questions during the presentation, there is time for Q&A at the end, but I would highly encourage you to put those questions in the Q&A box, separate from the chat box, just because it makes it easy for us to track those questions. We don't want to lose them in the chat. We want to make sure you get the answers you need. And you can, of course, upvote or like different questions, and it will move them to the top of the list, and we will get to those first. So check those out. I did also drop a note in here about Twitter. If you're a Twitter user, we tweet some of the highlights of our sessions. You can follow along over there. You can add your own highlights and takeaways using this hashtag. And then if you would like to, do give Lesa-Kaye a follow. She posts some great stuff on her Twitter account. So all of the housekeeping stuff out of the way, Lesa-Kaye, let's get on with this awesome presentation you have for us.
Thank you, Abby. All right, so let me get us on our way. All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to prepare your nonprofit for its first or next grant. Now, before we start, I want you to grab a pen and paper if you don't already have a pen and paper or a pen and notebook nearby, because I'm going to share some grant gems that you don't want to miss. Try to limit distractions as much as possible. I know that's sometimes a little difficult, especially if you're still working from home, and get ready to participate. So I'm going to be asking questions. Feel free to share your thoughts, your answers in the chat, and of course, post your questions in the Q&A box. That will help us keep track of them, as Abby shared, and I'll be sure to answer those questions during the Q&A session. Now, I'd like to get to know you a bit more. If you haven't already shared in the chat where you're Zooming from, like where are you joining us from, feel free to share that. And then also let me know, have you applied for grants before? Maybe you've even won grants before. And then also complete this sentence. I am here today because. So you can go ahead and share that in the chat and share it with everyone else. Someone shared very little grant proposal writing experience. Someone said, I need to know the process. I saw people from Ontario. I saw people from Milwaukee, Florida, Toronto, Denver, Colorado, like people from all over the country. I think I saw someone from Nigeria, Fort Worth, Texas. And someone said, yes, I've written hundreds of grants. Sounds like we would be friends, Natalie. St. Paul, Minnesota. And another person, Lisa, says, yes, she's applied and been awarded grants. That's great to hear. I'm seeing lots of people from Canada, which is really, really impressive to hear of QGIV's reach. And so as you continue to share that in the chat, I'm going to share a little bit about me so you know who's talking to you. And so here are a few things you won't find about me in my professional bio. So I was born and raised in Jamaica. And when I'm talking about something that I'm excited about, like grants, if you listen really closely, you might hear a slight accent. I'm not new to grants. I'm true to grants. I work at a university in Washington, D.C., helping faculty and staff secure grant funding for either research or workforce development programs, scholarship programs, and so forth. I've also worked for well over a decade at health nonprofits across the United States, as well as national organizations. And I got my start in grants at a public grant making charity, managing their grant making programs and helping organizations secure grant funding from the charity. I help community organizations learn and master the skills they need to win their first or next grant. That's what I do during my 5 to 9. I do workshops, one-on-one coachings, group coachings, webinars, like ones like this. I'm the one that organizations call when they want to build or rebuild thriving grant programs. And then I also help fellow grant professionals build their confidence, their competence, and grant careers. So it is grants 24/7 in my house. And so I'm a huge grant nerd. I'm going to try to cover as much as I can in the next hour. I've got my notes to help me stay on track. And so today we are going to cover not just only how to prepare for your first or next grant, but we're going to do a quick intro to grants for those who are new to the grant world. We'll cover the stages of the grants process, what you need to know to move through each stage, the top reasons why grant proposals get rejected, and then the number one thing you need to increase your grant success, signs that you might be ready for grants. And then I'm going to share 5 steps that anyone can take to get ready for their first or next grant. These are going to be steps that are going to make the process not seem as overwhelming or as stressful, and it will also help you be more successful when you're pursuing grants. And then we'll have Q&A discussion towards the end. And so that's what we're going to cover today. Let's jump right in with a quick little grants 101. So what is a grant? So the simple definition, or the simplest definition, is a grant is a sum of money given by one party to another party for a particular purpose. So let's break that down a little bit more. So one party would be a foundation, a family foundation, a community foundation, a corporation, a government agency, so your city, your state, your federal US agencies as well. They give out grants. Civic organizations like your Rotary clubs, your junior leagues also give out grants. And then from those parties to another, that would be nonprofits or for-profit businesses, education organizations like universities, like ones that I work at, K through 12 schools, hospitals, and individuals can also receive grants. What's really important is that when you're considering applying for a grant, with every single grant, what you want to do is you want to review who is eligible to apply for that grant. There are grants in which, especially grants from government agencies, where nonprofits, for-profit businesses, hospitals, universities are all eligible for that particular grant. And then there are grants where only universities are eligible for that grant. So it's really important that before you consider applying for a grant, once you found one, you think, oh, this might be it, that you review who is eligible for that grant. And it will describe that in what we call a request for proposals. Sometimes it's called a notice for funding opportunity or funding opportunity. And those come from the party that's giving the grant. Now, the other part of this definition is particular purpose. And this really just highlights that grants are really never about what your organization needs, but about the purpose that you are fulfilling and the people you are serving and how the grant helps your organization have an impact or make an impact. Now, many people get caught up in the grant money. They see these huge amounts of money and they're like, wow, dollar signs, and they completely miss the purpose of grants. So my definition is that grants are an opportunity to bring people together to work on solutions. It really means that grants are more than just money. It's more than just, $100,000 to your organization or 3.5 million to your organization or $50,000 to your organization or $10,000 grant to your organization. It's more than just receiving the money. Grants are a way to create possibilities for a community, for the community that you're serving, and it can help unlock possibilities for your organization as well. It can help your organization build its profile. It can help your organization become a bit more sustainable. It can help your organization oh, my slides are not progressing. 1 second. Gonna stop sharing and see what do we have going here. Let's see if this works. But it's an opportunity for your organization to build its reputation in the community. So let me know if you can see this slide. It should say how to get grants. If someone in the chat can let me know if you can see this slide. No, oh my gosh, okay. You would think after a year, I would have mastered sharing slides via Zoom, but it sounds like I haven't. So 1 second, let's see. All right, so you should see a slide that says how to get grants. Let me know in the chat if you can see that. All right, so yeah, now you can see them changing. Awesome. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So sorry about that. You didn't miss anything too much, okay? So the most popular question I get asked, right? Being in the Washington, D.C. area, the most popular question, the most common question I'm asked in most of the time in Zooms or when I see or meet someone for the first time is, how do I get grants, Lesa-Kaye? And so a grant is awarded or won as a result of a grant proposal, sometimes referred to as an application. And only eligible organizations or entities can apply, like what we just discussed. The application process, the deadlines, the requirements, who is eligible for applying for that grant is determined by the party that is giving the grant. So a government agency, let's say it's your Department of Health, they will determine and they'll list what the application process is, when the deadline is, who's eligible for the grant, what you need to have in place, what you need to have in your application for a specific grant that they have issued a request for proposals for, or a call for proposals, or a notice of a funding opportunity. So each party, or funder, the person who is giving the grant, well, not person, but entity that's giving the grant, For every grant that they announce that, hey, we have money available, we're issuing this grant, they will describe the application process, the deadline for the application, what your application needs to include, who's eligible, and a number of other information like, how much the grant is, and then a number of restrictions that they may have in terms of how the funding can be used. And it's a competitive process that requires more than writing a proposal and filling out like an application and filling out forms, which means that while eligibility is important, just meeting the eligibility criteria doesn't mean you're going to get the grant. Getting the grant requires organizations to be eligible and competitive. And so besides grants, one of my favorite pastimes is watching game shows. I don't know if there are any game show fans here. I've got a couple of favorite game shows, but we're actually going to play one of my favorites today. Can you guess what that is? Oh, not yet. I jumped ahead. Oh my gosh. Oh. So before we get to the game show, I want to let you know about the stages of the grants process. I was so excited to play this game with you that I almost forgot that I have a slide before that. So the stages of the grants process, there are 5 stages to the grants process. The first stage is readiness. The second stage is research. The third stage is relationships. The fourth stage is writing. And then the fifth stage is reporting. Now, every grant goes in this order. You have to go in this order. You can't skip any stages. Like, you must go in this order. And it's a cycle. So once you get to the end of reporting, you're going to go back through readiness again. Most people focus on just writing when it comes to grants or finding a grant. And they don't understand that there are stages to the grants process and that you have to go through each of these stages in order to be successful. So readiness is your organization's ability to get and keep grant funding. Research is finding the right funders. Relationships or relationship building is engaging potential funders or funding prospects, as we like to call them in the industry, to determine and qualify whether or not they really are a fit for your organization and the purpose that you are hoping to fulfill. And then writing is pretty self-explanatory. And then the fifth stage is reporting. This is, yay, you've won a grant, hooray, everyone is excited. And then it's time to go to work. And so this stage is about showing your receipts, how you spent the money, how you spent the grant money, and then showing your results, your program results, your project results. What did you produce through receiving the grant money? How many people you served? How many lives did you change? How did you increase the knowledge of let's say 9th graders about preparing for college, right? So reporting is about receipts and results. That's how I always remember it with the R's. Okay, so, all right, I see people are like, I love game shows. Me too. Someone said Price is Right. We're not playing Price is Right today, but that's a close second of mine. We are gonna play Family Feud. Oh yeah. All right, so are we ready? Okay, get ready to type your answers in the chat. All right, so they surveyed 100 grant funders. These are the people, the parties, the organizations, the foundations, the government agencies, the corporations that give grants. And they asked them, why do grant applications get rejected? What are the top 3 reasons why grant applications get rejected? So let me know in the chat. What are the top 3 reasons why grant applications get rejected? All right, I see some answers coming in. Some are on the nose, some are really close. They are some of the reasons why grant proposals or applications get rejected, but they're not the top 3 reasons. So this is Family Feud always gets you like that. You're like, oh, that's right, but it's not like one of the top 3, right? Okay, so what are the top 3 reasons grant proposals get rejected? Number 3, unclear project or program plan, resulting in an unclear grant proposal and application. What I tell the faculty and the staff at the university that I work with, and when I worked with exclusively with community-based organizations and nonprofits, when we work on grants, is that if they cannot plan a clear program, if they cannot plan a clear project with like clear goals, objectives, activities, a timeline, the resources that they need, if they cannot describe who the partners are and what the roles of the partners will be, and if they cannot describe the change or the impact, the results that their program or project produces, I cannot write a clear grant proposal. We cannot put together a clear grant application. So I would say, if you can't plan it, I can't write it. And that is why there are so many unclear, confusing, missing information where the dots don't connect to what you're doing and why you're doing it, is because there's an unclear project or program plan. The number 2 reason why grant proposals get rejected is the organization or the specific program that is seeking that grant or the project does not fit the funder's interests or requirements. And so when we talk about finding the right funders, finding the right grant through doing research and engaging them and building a relationship with them to determine whether or not you are a fit for each other, that your purposes align, that their interests match your interests, you're on the same page, you share the same values, which is very important if you are a small grassroots organization, to ensure that those who you are receiving money from, whether it's individual donors or corporations or foundations, that they align with your organization's values. That's really important. You do all of that to determine if that funder is a fit for you, because the better that you're aligned and that you're a fit, it increases your chances of receiving funding. It's not a slam dunk, but it boosts your competitiveness to get funding from that party or that entity. And the number 1 reason that grant proposals get rejected is that the organization or the program or project that you're applying for is not ready for grants. With all this said, in order to successfully win grants, organizations must be prepared to not only apply, but also manage the expectations, the requirements, the strings that come with grant funding. And so we've gone over, these are the top 3 reasons. And, one of the things that I want to say is that when I was starting out in the nonprofit world, like my first nonprofit job right out of grad school. Won't even tell you how many years, how many decades that was at this point. I made a lot of these similar mistakes when I started and was trying to win my first grant. And I teach these strategies to others so that they can avoid the mistakes that I made. I thought that having, I can write, I'm okay with writing, if it's well written, if the proposal's well written, that's all we need to get a grant. I just need to be a good writer. Sidebar, you don't need to be a best-selling author or write like a best-selling author to write a grant. You need to know how to make a logical, clear, convincing case for funding. I'm a horrible speller. I'll be the first person to tell you, but there are ways to work around that and still produce a well-written grant proposal. I also thought having an important cause was enough to get a grant. And I also applied for every grant that I found. I didn't focus on what was a good fit for the organization. What was a good fit for the program, the project that we were trying to launch or expand in some way? And so those are the top 3 reasons why grant proposals fail. But here's the thing. The number one thing you need to be successful when it comes to grants is to have an overarching strategy and a plan. Grant success is 80% planning, 20% writing. This is the number one thing you need is a plan. So you need a plan for every stage of this process. Waiting until you find a grant to get started, waiting until you find a grant and not having any kind of plan going into it is a costly mistake. When you are proactive, it makes for a more thoughtful, successful, and less stressful grant process. So you need a plan for every stage of this process. And it starts with readiness. So I'm going to share 5 steps to prepare for your first or next grant. 5 steps. So the first step is to assess your grant readiness. So what does it mean to be grant ready? So grant readiness is your nonprofit's ability to win and keep grant funding. And readiness is one of the most important factors to success because it indicates that your organization has the resources, it has the capabilities to track your revenue, to track your expenses, to produce results, that you have partnerships, you have built a reputation in the community for doing good work. It speaks, again, to your ability to do good work effectively, manage money, and deliver results. Now, we're going to debunk some myths and kind of set the record straight a bit. So the first is, we have our 501c3 certificate, Lesa-Kaye. We're definitely ready for grants. Now, I want you to let me know in the chat, is this a myth? Is this a half-truth? Or is this what I like to call a downright lie? You have your 501c3, you're definitely ready to roll, ready to apply, ready to get grants. Is this a myth, a half-truth, or what I like to say, that's a downright lie? All right, I'm going to tell you, it is. It is a half truth. And the reason it's a half truth is that having your 501c3 means you are eligible. So again, readiness is about eligibility and competitiveness. So this is a half truth in that, you need your 501c3 certificate, but that does not mean that you're ready for grants. That alone does not mean that you are ready for grants. All right, so that's the first myth we've debunked. The next one is, I'm having some interesting tech difficulties today. Our nonprofit has been operating for years, so we are ready to compete for grants. Is this a myth, a half-truth, or a downright lie? Our nonprofit has been operating for years, Lesa-Kaye. We are so ready to compete for grants. Is this a myth, a half-truth, or a downright lie? Gotta tell you, this is a downright lie. And the reason is that there's so many nonprofits that have been operating for years, and they may need to not only that they haven't established their foundation, they're having a solid foundation as an organization, but it could be that they haven't maintained that foundation. So what that means is maybe their reputation in the community is not as strong as it used to be. Or they don't have programs that are fundable. So, they have low participation from community members or the people they're serving, the clients that they're serving, the individuals they're serving. They don't have any results or impact to show of that program. They're in a financial decline. They don't have any structure. Nothing's written down. They don't have a system or any procedures in place to help guide their work. And they don't have a strategic plan or direction. And funders know when you're kind of they know the organizations that are barely hanging on. They look at the information you provide in your grant application. They also do their homework. They talk to other funders. They talk to others in the community, and they can kind of tease out that an organization is barely hanging on. And so, let's say you were able to kind of sneak one by a funder, and you were able to get a grant. If you're not ready to manage that grant, you're not ready to manage the expectations, you're not ready to fulfill the reporting requirements, you can really put your organization at financial risk and your reputation at risk if you don't produce results and manage the grant well. So just, one of the things I hear a lot from organizations is, well, we've been around for a long time, so we're definitely ready. I've worked with those organizations, and I can tell you, once you kind of peel things back, you kind of see, oh, there's some cracks in the foundation. All right, so the next one is this a myth, a half-truth, or a downright lie? We just need to hire a grant writer who can guarantee us results. This is my favorite one, by the way. Is this a myth, a half-truth, or is this a downright lie? We just need to hire a really good grant writer, Lesa-Kaye. Is this a myth, a half-truth, or a downright lie? All right, I'm going to tell you what it is. It is a downright lie. What if I told you that just because you hire a grant writer doesn't mean you'll win grants. Oh, right? So the most qualified grant professionals oftentimes don't work with organizations that haven't invested the time and the effort in getting ready for grants, in building a solid foundation, because they know that readiness is one of the most important factors in boosting your competitiveness for grants. So, hiring a grant writer does not mean that you will get grants. You really have to invest in positioning your organization in terms of building a solid foundation and getting your organization ready for grants. And the great thing is, building a solid foundation and grant readiness, it's the same task and activities that you have to do. So when you build and maintain a solid foundation, you are then boosting your grant readiness. So here are some things I want you to know about grant readiness. Eligibility and competitiveness are not the same thing. So being grant ready is more than just kind of gathering your organization's paperwork and information. You have to also focus on how your organization is positioned in the community. Have you built a solid reputation? Do you have the ability to track your expenses? Can you show that your programs, your projects, your services produce results for people? Do they make a difference in the community? And then in terms of government grants, that requires what I call next level readiness. And so my recommendation to organizations is that if you've never applied for a grant before, if you've never received a grant before, that you start with your local foundation, start with corporations in your area, and then move to government grants after you've had success for a few years. Government grants require another level of readiness, another level of competitiveness. And so if you start with a community foundation and getting to know them and getting a grant from them, and then move on and maybe you get a grant from a foundation, you're now building your capacity. You are able to demonstrate to other funders, including government funders, that you are able to manage money effectively and meet reporting requirements. The other thing to know is that age is sometimes just a number. Like I said, there are nonprofits that have been around for decades that are not grant ready. If you are at a nonprofit that is under 3 years old, usually you're not ready for grants just yet. And that's only because one of the things that's often required for grant applications is 3 years of financial reports. And so if you don't have 3 years of financial reports, if you don't have 3 years of tax returns, then it's something that you don't have to include in your application. And so usually I tell nonprofits that are 3 years and under that they should focus on building their foundation, build a solid foundation. One of the ways to help do that is to focus on individual donors, focus on events and raising money in that way, focus on raising money through some kind of earned income, selling some kind of product, providing services on a sliding scale fee. And now you've built your financial standing to then say to a grant funder, we are financially stable. We are a good investment. We are a safe and sound investment. We can manage money. We can produce results. We are, we have our tax records to show. We have our financial records are for the past 3 years or 4 years to show. And so that's how you build your grant readiness and boost your competitiveness while you're still a young, emerging nonprofit. And then just keep in mind that grant readiness is a continuous, intentional effort. It's not a one and done. It's not a, well, we focused on readiness and we're good. No, it's something that you have to continuously focus on. It's about maintaining your foundation, maintaining your competitive edge. And it doesn't happen overnight. It can be something for if you are a nonprofit that's new or a nonprofit that maybe is in decline. It could be that you're focusing on grant readiness for 3 to 5 years before you submit for a grant. So you might be grant ready if your organization has strong community engagement. You have strong leadership, staff, and board members being that you have at least 7 to 10 board members. They contribute to the organization in some way, either financially, or they provide some kind of expertise. They're representative of the community that you serve. You have financial records. You are a legal organization on paper. So that's your, having your 501c3, having, your 990s, having your annual budget, having your financial report each year that shows your revenue and your expenses, having existing fundraising. Funders don't like to invest or give money to organizations that are not on strong financial standing because they believe that organization may not be around in the next year or so. So for them, it's not a safe or sound investment to make. Then it's also having relevant result producing programs, credibility in the community, and a strong, clear vision and strategic plan. Where is the organization going in the next year? Where is the organization going in the next 3 years? And how does it plan to get there? So here's the thing. Grant ready nonprofits, like I said, don't appear overnight. You can improve your grant readiness and boost your competitiveness for funding. And I'm going to just share some common areas that I see that organizations usually have to address to increase their grant readiness. Now, what I like to say is that most funding problems, if an organization is struggling with getting funding, usually it means that there is a problem in one of these areas, either with their management, their governance, which is like their board, their leadership, their financial resources, how they're managing and tracking their money, and then their systems. And so you improve your grant readiness by building and managing an engaged board of directors, having a clearly defined mission statement, programs that produce results with plans and budgets, having an annual organizational budget, and then developing and growing your existing funding sources. So focusing on those individuals, your earned income, your events. Grants are should be a part of your revenue. They should not be the sole source of how you support the organization. And so you want to have diversified revenue and really focusing on individuals and earned revenue is really important even after you get grants. So step number 2, that was a lot for step number 1, but it's so important to assess your grant readiness. Step number 2 is to gain clarity on your community and your nonprofit's priorities and needs. So I do have a free, what I call the Finding Funders Starter Kit of the key decisions you need to kind of make. It walks you through those key decisions to helping you find grant funders that are likely to support your organization. And the first step is to get clear on what your community and nonprofits priorities and needs are. So I tell people to, gather your team. Even if you're a team of one, gather your board members, talk to your community partners, talk to, you can do focus groups with the individuals that you serve, and identify what are the needs and priorities for the next year. Determine what the budget items and amounts are. So maybe it's a program that wants to expand. Someone wants to expand one of your existing programs. Someone wants to create a new program. Well, not maybe someone, your organization. It shouldn't be one person. And then you determine how much is needed and what is needed. Maybe expanding the program requires that you need a new staff member, and you need at least $25,000 to fill the gap for that person's salary. And then you're going to share this list with program and project descriptions, the amount that you need with your board members and other staff, because that is how you really establish what I call shared goals. So when people have the information of, oh, these are the priorities for the next year in terms of what we need funding for. So that is the second step, is to gain clarity on your community and your nonprofit's priorities and needs. And it's really important because this step is how you're going to be able to connect the dots before you go looking for grants. You have to have clarity on what the priorities and needs are. Step number 3 is to create an outreach and cultivation plan for each potential grant funder. Now, this does not need to be a fancy plan. It literally can be bullets. And you'll brainstorm with your team, with your board. How do you establish a line of communication with a specific funder and the funder's board members? So let's say it's the Virginia Community Foundation that you're interested in getting a grant from. And you brainstorm with your team and your board, and you find out, oh, there's someone on our board who knows someone on their board. Well, let's brainstorm, how are we going to reach out to that board member? Who on the team is going to be involved in starting to build that relationship with that board member at that foundation, and thus the program officer at that foundation? And then how are you going to engage them beyond just calls and emails? Are you going to invite them to some of your events? Are you going to mail them stories about the impact of your work? Are you going to invite them to maybe, see the work in action? And so really start thinking of a plan for how you're going to engage and cultivate a relationship with potential funders. And you can do this for each potential funder that you think might be a fit for your organization. And step 4 is to get organized. I love organization. And so this is going to make your grant life so much easier. So what I recommend people do is to gather, organize, and create an electronic folder, whether you use Google or Dropbox or on your desktop or wherever, an electronic folder, and you can label it grant attachments or grant resources or grant files, whatever works for you, and save these key documents in that folder. because you're going to use these documents over and over and over again. So this is like an easy like check mark, right? Like I love when I'm like, oh, that's easy. When I can like check something off my list, I feel like so accomplished. So this is like an easy thing you can check off your list. And then you can look at it every year and make sure that, you know, everything is up to date. Maybe, you know, your organizational budget changes each year. So you put the new copy in there. Maybe of new programs, maybe of new partners, you put your most recent tax documents in there. So creating a folder that is your go-to of the common attachments that you will need for a grant application is an easy check mark. Step number 5 is to create your go-to template. My recommendation is for people to start writing the common parts of a grant application ahead of time. Now, I said writing, but this is not a writing exercise because one cannot write what does not exist. So if you're starting to put together your template and you're realizing our organization doesn't have like a mission statement that's clear. Like when I read it, I don't know what we do really. Or even better, when I read it, it's like really long. Or, you know, we don't have board members that are contributing in any way to the organization. So I can't describe that. We don't have any program results of the past 3 to 5 years or even 1 year. So how can I describe that in this document? Doing this is going to help you uncover where the gaps are in your organizational and program readiness. So don't think of this as a writing exercise. It's really an assessment and a planning exercise, and it'll help you uncover, you know, where there are gaps, where you may need to where your organization may need to bolster and improve. But if you put together a great template, I can tell you that when you have to write a grant, you are going to go to that template, you're going to grab sections from it, you're going to put it in your grant application, you're going to change a couple of things, and then you are good to go. It'll cut back your writing time and it'll feel less stressful in terms of writing a grant. So I'm going to recap really quick because we are coming up really close to the hour. These are the steps to prepare for your first or next grant. Wherever you are in the process, whether you've never applied for a grant before, or you've applied for grants and you are ready to take it to the next level, or you're just like, I'm just trying to get my next grant. Step 1 is to assess your grant readiness. Step 2, gain clarity on your community and nonprofits' priorities and needs. Step 3, create an outreach and cultivation plan for each potential grant funder. Step 4 is my easy, like, check it off the list. Get organized. Save those key documents electronically. Really important to have them electronically, because if something disappears, you're like, I got it electronically. So whether it's Google folders, Dropbox, on your, you know, in your computer drive, whatever works for you. Step 5, create that go-to template. And keep in mind that if you can't write it because it doesn't exist, that is probably an area that your organization may need to focus on. And you can signal that to, if you are not the organization's leadership, then to the organization's leadership. And then before we get to Q&A, I just want to say, failing to plan is planning to fail. You've probably heard that quote before. And so waiting until you have to apply for a grant to kind of get started and to have a plan is a costly mistake. So these 5 steps are really just going to help you get started in having a plan for how to prepare for your first or next grant. So I'm going to jump really quickly to the Q&A. These are just slides about where you can find me. You can find me at fromlesakaye.com. These are ways that I can support you, whether it's one-on-ones or through my online courses or programs. I also do group trainings, very similar to today's webinar. And you can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. I'm most active on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can find me at From Lesa-Kaye on all social media. And now for questions. Questions. Let me see.
We've got some really great questions.
Awesome.
So first off, I just wanted to say you guys have been so wonderful with sharing your insights and whatnot in the chat. It's been really great to watch. And one question that came up and kind of came up in smattering places. Amy asked, should you include details about your financial stability, history of the results that you've had in the past, if that is not specifically asked for in the grant, like applications or requirements?
You don't have to, so there are a couple of ways you can actually do this. So sometimes there's a section where it asks to describe your organization's capabilities or capacity. And that section is where you can include that information. So you can highlight your financial, that you're financially stable by maybe saying things like your annual revenue is, I don't know, 2 million, and it includes a mix of earned revenue, donations from individuals. Some of your supporters include Target Foundation, XYZ. You can put that in. There's usually a section where you have to describe your organization's history and capabilities. If that section is not there, most of the time grant applications are going to ask for your financial records as an attachment. So they're going to ask for your annual budget, and then they may ask for your audited financials from the previous year, and then they'll ask for your tax, a copy of your latest tax return, like the tax return version for nonprofits, your 990. And what they're going to do is they're going to look through all of that. So you can either, depends on the funder, they're either going to ask for all of that information, or they're going to have you in some way describe that in your history and capabilities of the organization. Great question.
Yeah. So we have some more questions about that kind of reporting aspect of it. And a really interesting one that just popped up is about how clear we should be when writing grants about targets we didn't hit, particularly financially, but I can see targets not being hit with different programs. How forthcoming or transparent should we be about those shortcomings, and how do we approach those honestly without jeopardizing the grant writing process?
Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about reporting, I do see that anonymous question about reportings. I'm going to stop my share so you can see my face. I don't know if yeah, here we go. So if we're talking about reporting, and so this is, you've gotten a grant and you're trying to figure out like how forthcoming should we be about not hitting our goals, whether they're programmatic goals or financial goals. And I'm going to say, if it's a funder that is giving you money, you should be as honest as possible. But what I would say you should do is, before you put it in your report to that grant funder, your grant report, whether it's, a 6-month report, an annual report, or some of them do quarterly reports, but they're getting away from that, is you call your program officer. The second you're like, oh, we are not going to hit our goals, call your program officer and have that conversation with them and say, it's looking like we're not going to be able to meet the goal that we set, and let them know some of the things why that you're doing to mitigate the impact, or you're doing to kind of turn the ship around. So have that conversation with your program officer. They are your ally. And that's why it's important to get to know them before you apply for the grant. Because when you get the grant, it's like a marriage. You get the grant, you're going to be like, oh man, I'm stuck with them. So you want to make sure that you build that relationship with them. You have that open line of communication. No program officer wants to read a report at the end of the year and go, oh my gosh, they didn't meet their goals. Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they call me? So, establishing those lines of communication with your program officer and having that conversation before you put that in your reports to them is helpful.
That's wonderful. Let's see. So some of the terminology here is unfamiliar to me, but Stephen said if you have multiple key partners, but you have limited space to include information about them, I guess like word or character limits, what are some of the high points to hit when you're talking about those partners?
Ooh, that's a great question. So there are a couple of things you can do. So let's say if you have maybe limited space in terms of page limit and you can't include what's called like a letter of support from each of your partners. This is one thing, I love this because I actually just did this morning. Again, I write grants for a living. You can do one letter that has all your partners have signed it. So let's say instead of having each partner write a 1 to 2 page letter, you write one letter that is on behalf of all your partners. And they each then sign that last page. So now you go from having 2 pages from each partner to having just 2 pages. That's one thing. You don't have to get a letter from every single partner. You want to get a letter from maybe each type of partner. So let's say maybe you're an organization that works with schools, principals, parent groups, and I don't know, youth organizations. I don't know what those are. Like, let's say Boys and Girls Clubs, right? There you go. You can get a letter maybe from each type of partner. So you don't have to get it from all the Boys and Girls Clubs that you work with, but just get from one. You don't have to get it from every principal, just get it from maybe the school district if you can, or just one principal. And then in your narrative, in the proposal, in the proposal part of the application, the narrative part, the part that you write, when you describe your partners, my favorite word to use is such as. My other favorite word is including. So you can say our key partners include, and then you list some of the key partners. Don't have to list all. And then describe how you work with those partners, right? So our key partners include 7 Boys and Girls Clubs or something like that. And we work with them to identify students that may need a mentor. I'm making this all up right now. We work with principals in all of the schools in this part of the city. And this is how we work with principals. You don't have to list every single principal's name. You don't have to get a letter from every principal. You just want to have a couple of examples that show, that really demonstrate that you have those relationships in place. This is all about what you can demonstrate to that funder. Really great question.
So good. So it looks like we're getting a number of different questions that are more specific about like individual issues that have arisen. And I know your time is super valuable and everyone else's. So I'm going to ask one more question and then tell you all, Lesa-Kaye earlier has graciously offered to make herself available if you have questions specifically about your own circumstances. So I'll include that information in the follow-up email. But one last question. This was great. What are some of the best questions to ask a program officer when reaching out for the first time and trying to establish a relationship with that foundation?
That is a great question. It is so great that I actually teach that as a part of one of my workshops. So I'm going to give you like the sound bite of that. So questions to ask are, what types of, who are some of their current and past grantees, right? So who have they provided grants to? Even if you know the answer, ask the question, right? And then another great question is, what do they look for in a partner? Because this is a partnership. What's most important to them? And then I would share a little bit about your program and then ask them for, their advice in terms of, what do you think of, the best ways to further position this program or expand this program? Or what are some ways that we can, we're doing great with engagement from our participants. We'd love to have more engagement from them. We'd like to hear if you have any thoughts or ideas. Doesn't mean you're going to take them. It just means you're establishing that conversation and you're starting to build that rapport and that relationship. But minimum, you should definitely ask them, what are their requirements in terms of submission? Who are their current and past grantees? And then what do they look for in a partnership? What's most important to them? Questions you would ask, if you were out in the world dating and, trying to find the one, what's most important to you? What are your values? So those kind of questions.
That's so good. I love the idea of approaching it as a relationship and not as a transaction. That is, I think, a distinction that's really important that I honestly never really thought about. This is new to me, and I so appreciate you sharing all this information. I know I've learned a ton. A couple of people have commented that they've learned a ton. Thank you so much for everything you've shared today. Everyone, I am going to include a link to Lesa-Kaye's website and some of her resources in the follow-up email. She has also offered, is your website the best way to get a hold of you? Are there any other avenues you'd like us to share?
My website is the best way to get a hold of me. You can book time with me one-on-one. But if you have a quick question, I answer grant questions sometimes just in the middle of the night from people. So if you want to email me a question that you have, doesn't matter how detailed, I may say, I need more information. Let's jump on a call and I'll schedule a time with you. But shoot me an email. My email is hello@fromlesakaye.com. It's also included in the slides. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I'd like to connect, or hey, I'd like to, I have an issue and I'd love to, talk it through with you. Again, this is what I do all day, every day. So I'm happy to troubleshoot, brainstorm, answer questions. If you are having what I call a grant conundrum, you're not sure how to work your way out of it, I'm happy to brainstorm that with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. You've been so fun and engaging. It has been a great session. I cannot wait to work with you again. Everyone, do keep your eye on your inboxes tomorrow. I'll send you an email after we conclude all this. I'll get the recording on YouTube. I'll build you an email. I'll include links to Lesa-Kaye's website, links to the slides, everything you need after this. And keep an eye on your inbox and have a great day. You guys are killing it. Thank you for spending so much of your valuable time with us this afternoon. All right, everyone, have a great day.
Bye.